Buenas and Hafade, Manana Situus, Sainam Asi to everyone for being here today. It's good to see quite so many people here on an early Monday morning, so thank you very much for that. This hearing by the Committee on Public Accountability, Human Resources, and the Guam Buildup is called to order. It is now 10:35. For the record, and in accordance with the 5 GCA Chapter 8, subsection 8107, public hearing notices were sent on Friday, October 25th, 2019, adhering to the 5 days notice and a second public notice on Wednesday, October 30th, 2019, 48 hours prior. In addition, this hearing was noticed on the legislature's website, www.guamlegislature.com. Written testimonies may be submitted by emailing speaker@guamlegislature.org, or you may hand deliver to our office at 163 Chalan Santo Papa, Hagåtña, Guam. As you may have noticed, I'm sitting in for the speaker today. I am her vice chair, and so she asked me to preside. On the agenda, ladies and gentlemen, we have 3 appointments: the appointment of John A. Smith as a member of the Civil Service Commission to serve a term of 6 years, the appointment of Anthony P. Benavente as a member of the Civil Service Commission to fill the expired term of Julie L. Kanata. So that will be from October through September 2025. October of this year through September 2025. And the appointment of David N. Sanford as a member of the Board of Trustees, Government of Guam Retirement Fund, being a private sector representative, to serve a term of 5 years to fill the expired term of Gerard Cruz. The conduct of this public hearing shall be as follows. Those testifying will be recognized in the order of the sign-up sheet. Written testimony may be read. In the interest of time, I ask testimony to be summarized to about 5 minutes if it ends up being long testimony. Written testimony shall be submitted to the committee. Please provide our legislative staff with your written testimony for photocopying. Testimony shall be confined to the substance of this particular hearing. Persons will be allowed to present oral testimony only once. Once you are done, you may be asked to remain in the room for questions or for additional testimony, as may be desired. Proper form and decorum shall be practiced by all present in the public hearing room. For the proceedings, individuals who do not comply may be escorted from the public room. When you speak, please make sure that your microphone is on and that you speak into the microphone. And begin by stating your name for the record. With that being said, we will now move on to the confirmation hearing of Mr. John A. Smith. When I call your name, please be seated, state your name for the record, and begin your testimony once called upon. So for those here of the names that I call that are testifying in support of Mr. Smith, please come to the table if you are indeed testifying for Mr. Smith. Priscilla Tuncap, Daniel Leon Guerrero, Juan Calvo, John A. Smith, Amelia Rice, Louis Baza, and Roland, sorry, I'm having a little trouble reading that. I think it's Verhering, yes. So if any of you, especially of course, Mr. John Smith is going to be testifying for himself, but if there are others here that will be testifying on his behalf, please come to the table. Gulf Malik. So what we will do, and it is largely in the order of the sign-up sheet, is we will go through those that are here to support Mr. Smith, and then we will hear from Mr. Smith last. May I go ahead and have Mr. Leon Guerrero go ahead and introduce yourself and begin your testimony.
Thank you very much. My name is Daniel Younger. I'm the Executive Director of the Civil Service Commission, and I'm here to testify for the confirmation of Mr. Smith as Commissioner for the Civil Service Commission. Hafa Adai, Honorable Madam Speaker Tina Muña Barnes, and distinguished senators of the Committee of Public Accountability, Human Resources, and Guam Biwa. I apologize, it's actually Vice Speaker Taitano. The Honorable Magahagan Guaham Lourdes A. Leon Guerrero reappointed Mr. John A. Smith to a third term to serve on the Civil Service Commission Board. Mr. Smith's reappointment is a testimony of his performance, commitment, and integrity that is required of a member of the Civil Service Commission. Mr. Smith and I served together as Civil Service Commissioners for approximately 7 years. Based on our interactions, I affirm that Mr. Smith will work to make firm decisions consistent with the merit laws and principles. Mr. Smith also work experiences as a business manager covers over 26 years for various companies, including Gibson Department Store, Townhouse Store, Coshules, and he is currently a general manager of the Jones and Guerrero Company. His work experiences enhances his understanding of the importance of the integrity of an organization. Mr. Smith graduated with a bachelor's degree of science and majored in accounting from Wayne State University, Detroit, Michigan. The Civil Service Commission will be fortunate to get an experienced and qualified candidate to serve as commissioner. Mr. Smith has served as commissioner for 2 terms, starting in 2003, and today he's prepared to serve a 3rd term. I unequivocally support Mr. Smith's reconfirmation as Commissioner of the Civil Service Commission, and I believe he will be effective and productive. Conclude na si Zeus Maasi.
Saina Maasi for your testimony. And I was noticing, as you were mentioning some of his many years of experience, it was a little bit of a walk down memory lane. I remember being at the Gibson Department Store, the Townhouse Store, etc. So now it's good to know who was some of behind all of that. Now let's move on to Juan Calvo, and then I'll have some questions at the end for certainly Mr. Smith and maybe a few others.
Sidus Masi, Vice Speaker, Senator Taitano. My name is Juan K. Calvo. I'm here to support the reappointment and confirmation of John A. Smith. Buenas at saludo, Madam Speaker, Senators and members of the Committee of Public Accountability, Human Resources, and the Guam Bureau. Our Governor, Lou Guerrero, and Lieutenant Governor Justin Orio had reappointed John A. Smith as the Civil Service Commission Board for the next 3rd term. I'm in support of his reappointment and hoping that your committee would consider and confirm his reappointment as Civil Service Commission Board for the 3rd time. As a former and retired personnel management administrator with the Civil Service Commission, I sat and attended on many hearings covering adverse action, grievance appeal, post-audit investigation, equal employment opportunity appeals, whistleblowers, classification compensation appeal, and other employment matters conducted by the CSC Board. Commissioner John A. Smith was there exercising his civil duty to hear and adjudicate the cases based on the merit system, laws and rules and regulations, and other applicable policies and procedures as required. There's one thing that caught my attention on Commissioner Smith. He was prepared, talented, listened, open, and being fair with employees and management. That's a plus for the Commission. Commissioner Smith is no stranger to employment matters. He has over 30 years of experience managing organizational staffing at all levels, is inclusive of promoting and fulfilling business goals and objectives. Executive at Gibson, Kosher-Les, Townhouse, and Johnson Guerrero Company. He is an asset to the Commission in ensuring that our merit system laws and rules are protected and administered appropriately as required. I therefore support the reappointment and confirmation of John Smith as Civil Service Commission Board and a member for the third time. Jesus Mas.
Hagemas. Thank you very much for that testimony. It is really helpful to hear the statements that are being said, especially by people who have sat and worked with him or have known him over the years. Words that are being used, such as integrity, having that experience and having seen that experience firsthand of being open and listening and being fair, those are all really important things to be hearing. So, Sainam Asi for that. Or Sainam Asi para now. I'm working on my tomorrow. Next, we'll hear from Mr. Baza. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Speaker. Taitanu. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to testify on the reappointment of John Smith. My name is Louis Baza. I'm the Chairman for Civil Service Commission. First off, I want to thank the Governor Lou Leon Guerrero and Lieutenant Governor Josh Tenorio for really trying to fill the 7 slots that we have at Civil Service Commission. Currently, we have 6 right now. With John with the reappointment and Mr. Beneventi that is coming up in the next hearing. I've worked with John for a long time in the commission as chairman, and I see him to be a fair man. He's got a lot of experience in the private institution. He's got business managerial experience in the private institution. He understands the at-will provision versus in the government of Guam, a merit system. So putting those two together, he's fair. When he deliberates, he looks at the facts. He's not making decisions frivolously. And I've never, in my time that as chairman there, seen John even absent in any of the hearings. Maybe a little late, but he's always there. So, and he doesn't take vacations, and we were thankful for that. Maybe he takes vacation when it's a vacation for us. But he's very knowledgeable, and I personally appreciate when he deliberates with us, his reading the packets, because commissioners, we have a tedious assignments by different cases that come before us, so we have to read the packet. And it's always a breath of fresh air when we have one of our seniors that has been there for a long time, that we see his perspective and fairness. Because in the private sector, at-will is easy. You can fire anybody with or without cause. That's the at-will provision. But he knows that system in government, that we follow a merit system in terms of progressive disciplinary action. Okay, so I, as well as other commissioners, we wholeheartedly support the reappointment of John Smith to continue a 3rd term. And I was very happy when he said that he would accept it, because he wanted to retire, actually. But I think with the director and John and myself, I think we convinced him to stay with us. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Sijuis Masi, Mr. Baza. And again, hearing those qualities that you're putting forth, wholeheartedly supporting his accepting a reappointment, his being professional, impartial, making decisions that are fact-based, those are all incredibly important given what can be coming through the commission. So those are very, very important to hear. And as you mentioned, in both your oral testimony and your letter, that he has the ability to remain enthusiastic and committed to the work, even though there are long, tedious hours and work that is part of what the commission does. So again, those are really important qualities to be hearing about, and to be hearing especially from people that have known him over the years. So we'll move on to hearing from Mr. Smith himself, and then, as I said, I'll have a few questions.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I don't have a prepared speech or anything. I've always believed that wherever I am or wherever I work, it's important to be part of the community, and I've always strived at that. When I lived in the Marshall Islands for 19 years, I sat on various different boards that were oriented for the islands and what was going on there, and that's how I got to know the customs and cultures of the islands and all that. Of course, I have a Marshallese wife. That helped a lot too. But coming to Guam, when I got here and I had an opportunity to, and I can't even remember exactly how it all happened, but there was an opening. It was actually former Governor Felix Camacho actually came to me. He and I had been talking about some other stuff, and then he says, "Would you be interested in the Civil Service Commission?" And I said, "Well, I'd love to do something," and and that's how I got started. And I've enjoyed it. It's given me a better perspective on the people of the island, and what goes on and how they do things, and it made it that much easier to understand everybody. So I've always prided myself in the fact that I try to give back to the community as much as I can, and I'm happily doing it. So thank you very much.
Sujuas Maasi for that. It's important to hear that people are interested in giving back. Really, a government only works if the community is part and parcel of the work that the government does. And so we very much appreciate all of the commission members and board members, task force members that are out there that devote these hours that they could be doing other things, but they're committed to the community and they're committed to giving back. And we really appreciate that there are many members of our community who are willing to do that. And so in lieu of retiring or shying away, we thank you for accepting the nomination and for being considered here. So I do have a few questions. And it's good that you've served in the past, so these might be then questions that you've thought about. When you're approaching your duties, well, I guess we've already heard that you remain impartial and objective. Is there any particular part of your experience, perhaps, that helps you in remaining impartial? Have you ever had to recuse yourself from a situation?
I can't remember when I've had to recuse myself. I'm sure there's probably been a time, but if I know the person very well and they've been a friend for a long time, I would recuse myself, because then somebody else might think I'm favoring that person or that. I can't really recall where it's happened to me in the past right now.
Sujuas Maasi for your answer. And it's also important to know that, people understand that part of the process, that from time to time it is important to recuse ourselves given the situation. Another point that I wanted to bring up is we've heard over the many months that a lot of boards and commissions have had trouble reaching quorum and being able to continue. And so the fact that you've been able to have been there from 2 previous terms shows us, and people are wanting you to come back, shows us that you're very committed. And so that's important to us, because the Civil Service Commission handles a lot of really important aspects of our government, and people that are committed to it and show up. I'm there with you. I'm being late sometimes. But show up and ensure that the work can continue. That's very important for us to hear. The other question that I have is, and maybe it's one that the Commission has tackled from time to time, A lesser-known duty of the Commission includes the power to investigate conditions of government employment as it deems necessary and report its findings and recommendations to the Governor and to the Legislature. Are there any conditions of government employment that in the past you have been part of feeling needed to be addressed as a policy change, or are there any that you think might be worth looking at in the future? So perhaps there aren't, but I thought I'd throw it out there to see if there were any issues that you've heard of or thought about.
None that come to my mind right now. I've just, I try to stay away from politics, honestly, as much as possible. Anytime we have a hearing or when things come up, I would relate, how would I do it if I'm in the, my being in the private sector primarily, how would that, how would that translate to the public side? Would I make the same decision? I always try to be as consistent as possible. But I can't think of anything other than that.
Well, it's good to hear that you're looking for things like consistency. As a government, we are rather large, at least for the island, and so we want to make sure that we're protecting everybody's rights and that we're being consistent and consistently applying them. So we appreciate that the Commission does have this ability, and if they do see policy changes that they need to recommend, that they will perhaps be deliberating and doing so.
Madam Speaker,
Yes.
can I just make a
Yes.
very quick comment on that?
Thank you.
Yes, actually, we have already made some proposal. The Executive Director and our legal counsel is doing something with respect to our post-audit actions because, we have some laws that directs us to get some of these cases done in 180 days, and then when we do an investigation and then it goes beyond that, we may be barred by it. So we need to get clarification. We need to put a little bit more teeth in our law because the department, let's say for example, somebody violates the merit system and we find that there is a violation of the merit system, they don't have to comply with it. Why? Because there's a law that says you only have a certain time to get action done. So the Executive Director and our legal counsel and with our Vice Chairman here, we're trying to, they're working on revamping the policy, the rule, the law, so that it's crystal clear that when action is being taken, when we find that when our staff does an investigation and they find that there's a violation of a merit system, true violation, it's not frivolous, it's clear and convincing, then action should be taken. I think that's why we're there. Civil Service Commission is there to hear cases like whistleblowing, cases like in post-audit investigation, people that violate by either hiring somebody on equal discriminatory nature, things like that. So I think we just needed to put a little bit more clarification in the law. And thank you for asking that question because we are actually in the process of making that presentation. Our Executive Director has been working tediously with the legal counsel to get that done. Thank you very much.
That's very good to hear. As I said, it's incumbent upon us as a government to be making sure that we are being consistent, that we are applying things fairly, and if there are ways that we can be making the law clearer, providing something that helps the Commission by strengthening the law or doing other revisions to it, it's important to hear those. So it's good to hear that you've been working towards this presentation, and I'm sure between the speaker and myself we'll continue working with you to see if we can do exactly that. Get something written so that we can be adding that clarification and strengthening that you're seeking. So thank you for bringing those points up, Jesus Maasi. So with that, If there's nobody else here to testify for Mr. Smith, I'll go ahead and let this panel go, and then we will move on to the next of the appointees. So what we'll do right now is it's 11 o'clock. We'll go ahead and recess just for a minute so that this panel may be excused, and then we can gather people together for the next nomination hearing. Thank you again for your time this morning. Okay, let's go ahead and start our hearing for Mr. Anthony P. Benavente as a member of the Civil Service Commission. I see many of the people here to testify. Maybe I got a bit ahead of myself excusing you because you're coming right back. So I appreciate your being here to also testify for Mr. Benavente. So some of the people are here in support, and several here are here to provide written testimony. So for those that are providing written testimony for Mr. Benavente, I'll read the names, and those that are going to be testifying, if you can, now I feel kind of badly that I sent you back, but if you can come step forward. Ms. Priscilla Tuncap, Juan Calvo, Emilia Rice, Daniel Leon Guerrero, Anthony Benavente, Luis Baza, and then we have a couple who are here for support, Mr. Eric Miller and Roland Verhering. But so in the order of this sign-up sheet, we have Mr. Juan Calvo signed up first. So if you could go ahead and begin your testimony and then start by stating your name and then moving on to the testimony.
Si Jus Masi Talunu, Vice Speaker Senator Taitano. My name is Juan K. Calvo. I'm here in support of confirming Mr. Anthony P. Benavente, also known as Tony, I call him Tony, as a board member with the Civil Service Commission. Buenos and saludo, Madam Speaker, Senators and members of the Committee on Public Accountability, Human Resources, and the Guam Build-Up. Our Governor, Lulong Guerrero, and Lieutenant Governor Justin Orio had appointed Mr. Tony P. Benavente as a board member with the Civil Service Commission to fill the last vacant position as required by law. The Civil Service Commission is composed of 7 board members with 4 affirmative votes to hear and adjudicate administrative cases. If Tony is confirmed by our 35th Guam legislature, all pending and future cases will be addressed immediately because the 4 affirmative votes will be secured. Tony and I worked together at the Department of Administration Human Resources Division for over 13 years. While I was supervising the classification compensation branch, Tony was overseeing the mission, mandates, and function of employee management relation branch. Tony is very knowledgeable in human resources, personnel rules and regulation, laws and policies and procedures. Thereafter, Tony, for several years, he subsequently retired with the government of Guam. And after his retirement, Tony pursued his dream of working with private firm, landing himself as a chief human resources at Stillwell Insurance Company for several years and finally retired. Today, Tony is ready, willing, and able to be a member of the Civil Service Commission. With his human resources background, both public and private, civil service employees and management would continue receiving a fair and balanced decision-making process as mandated under the merit system. I therefore support the confirmation of Tony P. Benevetti as a board member of the Civil Service Commission. Sendangkulo na si Diyos maasi.
It's good to hear that we have the potential to getting the commission fully empaneled, giving you really the tools necessary. So that is very good to hear, and Mr. Benavente, if he moves forward, would be just the person to do that. And it is good to hear of his human resources background. I think that's very important that we have a variety of backgrounds. Mr. Smith previously has more managerial background to my understanding, and then here we have the human resources side. So I think this gives us the diversity on the commission to understand the many issues that are involved in some of these, what are probably complex cases. And of course, working towards a fair and balanced decision is absolutely what we want to be having occur with these sorts of cases. And Saina Maasi, Mr. Benavente, for considering this position while you've been retired. They often say that once one retires, you're actually even busier than when you used to work. So hopefully we'll be fair to you, but we thank you very much for considering spending some of your time that way. We'll now go ahead and move on to Mr. Leon Guerrero. If you could start by stating your name again.
Half a day. My name is Daniel Leon Guerrero. I'm the Executive Director of the Civil Service Commission and here to testify for the appointment of Mr. Anthony Benavente. Mr. Benavente worked for the Human Resources Division at the Department of Administration as an Employment Management Labor Relations Officer for 19 years. He also worked for the Human Resources. He also was the Human Resources Administrator at the Guam Community College for 5 years. Then he moved to the private sector for, I guess, a different flavor, right? Or an opportunity again to practice his human relations skills. So he worked for Stillwell as the Human Resources Director for 9 years. And then he moved to IT&E-IP for 19 years. And now that he's retired, I heard that he was available, so I kept looking for Mr. Benavente. I couldn't find him, but finally I was lucky enough to get his phone number, and I asked him, would you be willing to work for the Civil Service Commission? He was absolutely, I really want, and I'm excited to come down and serve the community. Mr. Benavente also earned a bachelor's degree from the University of Guam in public administration. He received training in labor contract negotiations, labor managed relations, EEO, fair labor standards, ADAA, labor laws, and HIPAA. His many accomplishments include a professional human resource certified, and he also was awarded the Doc Sanchez Scholarship. He also was a member of the National Society for Human Resources Management and a member of the Guam chapter of the Society for Human Resources Management. Even me, like the vice chairman here, we had an opportunity to work with Mr. Beneventi. I worked at civil service, and of course he worked at Department of Administration. And many times we worked in certain projects and stuff that forced us to work together. And based on our interaction, I can affirm that Mr. Beneventi exhibited fine qualities of an excellent employee, possesses strong work ethics, dependable, positive attitude, self-motivated, and team-oriented. It's a win-win for the government and the community for Shots, an exceptional and qualified candidate to serve as a commissioner of the Civil Service Commission. I most definitely support Mr. Beneventi's confirmation as commissioner to the Civil Service Commission. He will truly be a positive contributor. Thank you, Jesus Masi, for the opportunity to testify. Thank you.
Hagid Mas. So it's, I must say, Mr. Benevente, Saina Maasi, for accepting with such enthusiasm as Mr. Leongaro expressed. Absolutely is absolutely a wonderful answer, so thank you for that. And to hear Mr. Leon Guerrero describe you as exceptional, definitely going through your application, you're extremely well qualified, we see, with a lot of training and a lot of experience, a lot of background. So those all work very much in your favor. So with that, we'll go ahead and move on to Mr. Baza. If you could start by stating your name.
Buenas again, and good morning, Madam Speaker. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to testify for the appointment of Tony Beneventi. Again, on behalf of the Governor, Lou Leon Guerrero, and Lieutenant Governor Josh Tenorio, this is the 7th member, and this will actually conclude, our seven seats that we have in the Civil Service Commission. It's important to have 7 people in there, as my vice chairman is saying. Sometimes when there's only 4 or 5 of us, when you're trying to defend your case, you need to get a little worried because there's a law that's a burden of proof. It's either the government or the employee. You need to have 4 votes. So having 7 sit in these hearings are very good for us. I know Tony Beneventi for a long time, actually. He used to be the Employee Management Relations Officer for the Department of Administration. And in that area, he handles actually grievances, adverse action, discrimination, anything and everything under the sun that deals with employee management relationship. We have these problems in the government, especially in the grievances processes. So Tony will give advisory, and DOA is one of the biggest government agency HR office that deals with, I think, 51 departments, maybe less, but aside from the autonomous agencies, he's handling all of that. So when Tony moved to GCC, he became the HR manager out there, and he actually applied his know-how, up at GCC and an educational institution. GCC and UOG are very interesting breed of the departments because the commission cannot handle academic and administrative positions. They only handle classified positions. So those jobs are actually so-called at-will unclassified. They have their own board. But the classified employees, we have jurisdiction for them. So it's interesting of his knowledge that he can actually work with the people that don't have the merit principles that they come to us to hear. Goes to a board. Then when he retired, then he moved to Staywell and ITE, IP&E, and he became an HR manager there too. So Tony, with I think over 20 years in the private institution, so he's got a feel of at-will provision versus merit system. Because in government you have merit system, in private you have at-will. At-will means that if you blink at me or if you look at me and you don't like me, I can fire you anytime. But I believe with Tony and his understanding of merit system, because I did it in the private institution from government to private, I actually try to apply a progressive disciplinary action and a merit system, although I can fire you anytime. But we applied that so that there's fair and equitable action taken against employees. Just don't fire them because you don't like how they look. Tony probably applied that same principles in the private institution because he's trained in the government. Government of Guam is complex. It's got a lot of laws, rules, and regulations that you follow. So you take that to the private institution and you can win the war, man. You know, I did it and he did it too, you know. So with all of his experience and training and coming into this to Civil Service Commission to hear these cases, it's actually not going to be very hard for him because he understands, he hears people. And I've never worked with Tony because this is going to be his first appointment, but I believe that with his knowledge, skills, and abilities, he can apply it when we deliberate. He reviews the, I know he's very thorough with packets. He's going to be reading all these packets and he's thorough. And when we deliberate, I am confident that he will come out with a recommendation that is merit system. And I, as well as all other commissioners, wholeheartedly endorse for Tony to be a member of the commission. And I want to thank him for accepting this position and his family, because there's going to be times that we will be working long hours, and even without the commission, he's going to be working long hours reading those packets. Jesus Masi.
Hagamas, and having served on a board myself in years past, I know those packets can be quite thick and quite a commitment of time. So again, we thank everybody for their time that they commit to that. And again, it was good to hear your endorsement, that you wholeheartedly endorse him, and important for us to be able to hear that he has handled grievances and adverse actions in the past. So he has that experience that he's bringing with us, him, and that he's worked in both government and private sectors, and hearing people. That's important as well. So thank you for all of those points that you were making. So I'll next turn it over to Mr. Benavente himself. Go ahead and begin by starting with your name.
Yeah, my name is Anthony Benavente. I'm the nominee, governor's appointment nominee to the Civil Service Commission Board. I do have a prepared statement. Okay, I'll just read that out to you. Honorable Madam Speaker, thank you for holding this hearing on my appointment to the Civil Service Commission Board. I would like to extend my gratitude to Governor Leon Guerrero, the Civil Service Commission Chairperson, Mr. Louis Baza, Vice Chairperson, Mr. John Cavo, and Mr. Daniel Longuerre, CSC Executive Director, for their confidence and support. I am deeply honored to be appearing here today before this committee. I am hopeful that with my training and background in human resources, you will consider my appointment as a positive and valued addition to the Civil Service Commission Board. I am very happy to say that I have the approval and full support of my loving wife, Patricia, to do this, understanding that it's going to take a lot of time in my part. In a nutshell, without restating what you already have in my nomination and appointment information, I believe that I have pertinent knowledge to be a positive contributor to the CSC board. I will rely on my experience in human resource working for large organizations in both the public and private sector, and especially at the Department of Administration, where I had the privilege to work with the Civil Service Commission staff and leadership on fundamental issues. Over my career, I believe that I have demonstrated strong work ethics and a commitment to uphold ethical and professional standards in human resource. I advanced my mastery in the practice of human resource management through testing and passing a professional human resource certification program, and subsequently receiving a PHR designation. I maintain my membership with the Society for Human Resource Management at the National and Guam chapter, participated in annual SHRM conferences, and supplemented my professional growth with trainings in a variety of HR subjects annually. If confirmed, I will try in every way to justify the support and faith given me. Thank you again for giving me this opportunity, and I look forward to your favorable consideration.
Sejus Masi Pera Anau. So as you mentioned, and that was one of the things that stood out to me, your many years of experience, the very fine testimony that's here been shared on your behalf, but also the types of training that you've had on labor and contract negotiations, on labor management relations, the fact that you have professional involvement with, as you mentioned, the National Society for Human Resources Management, the Guam chapter of Human Resources Management Organization, and that you're one of the volunteers for the senior citizens, the volunteer system where they are trained in Medicare benefits and eligibility, a very important service. So those all, I think, speak well to your commitment, to your expertise, and so forth. I have the same sort of questions that I had for Mr. Smith. Do you see any conflicts of interest as you proceed with these cases? And if so, how would you proceed?
In my experience, basically, I never had considered myself in any situation where I had a conflict of interest. More so is because I'm usually on the other side of the table, presenting management's point of view in terms of terminations, EEO cases. I usually am, in there for management. Although in my job as HR manager and at the Department of Administration, I do provide counseling advice to employees as well. But really, when it came down to the line, I do represent management in that regard. But to answer your question, no, I never really found myself in that situation.
And so if you determined that there was any conflict of interest, do you feel comfortable with understanding how and recusing yourself from those actions?
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
Very good. The other question that I have, and again, it seems that some of the process is already going on about reviewing the commission itself, things that could be strengthening it, perhaps some of the things that could be strengthening the government employment conditions. Is there anything that comes to mind at this point in time with the general government conditions that you think might be important for the commission to explore?
Yeah, basically, like any private citizen, I read the paper, I hear the cases that are published in the paper, and sometimes, I try to reserve judgments on these things. I do have my personal, feelings about these things, but I don't see the facts. I don't know what the commissioners go through when they look at these cases. And that's one of the things, again, in accepting this appointment is that it's going to be challenging. It's not going to be easy. And I know that these commissioners, when they do go out in the public, sometimes when they render an unpopular decision, that I'm sure they look at them personally and maybe personally attack them verbally, maybe. And that's something that I have to think about when I do, join with the the commissioners. But in regards to changes, I think recommendations, the 60-day rule, I just understand that was increased to 90 days, although I have my own personal feelings about that. If you provide proper training to managers, it doesn't really matter how many days you have to bring your case forward, as long as you know what you need to do. But I just understand, from Mr. Baza, that law has changed to 90 days. I think it doesn't relieve us from making sure that we train the government of Guam managers, because no matter how many days you put, if they are not aware of it and they don't follow it, it's still going to be an issue with the Civil Service Commission in terms of hearing the merit of the cases if you violate the policies.
Sejus Maasi for your thoughtful answer. And you're right. A lot of what you're going to be dealing with are facts that most of us don't know, and they're going to be very important in helping you determine the appropriate course of action. And that some of them, if not all of them, are going to be hard decisions, just because of the nature of them. And I like hearing about the preventative approach of making sure, we're trying to work to make sure that training is happening. I think along the same lines as you do is that by making sure that we're doing due diligence and providing that training, we're better protecting people from the top down, the bottom up, whichever way you look at it, so that they have the information and the tools to carry out hopefully good decisions and good actions, and that the employees, the staff, can be being protected in that way. So definitely, I think that we all need to remain on the alert for how we can be continuing to improve the training that we're providing to everybody within the government. So if there are no other testimony or statements, I'll go ahead, and this time for real, you get to leave the table and not be called back. Thank you again so much for your time this morning. It's been very important to hear, and it will be very helpful as people determine the nominations of Mr. Smith and Mr. Benavente. So we'll take just a brief recess to help everybody get organized. The time is now 11:26, and then we'll just gather everybody together in just a minute or two. Sana maasi. Okay, and we will begin with our third nomination. We're basically right on time, beginning again at 11:30. And here we have several people that are giving written testimony or are here for support. So as I call your name, if you're providing written testimony, if you could go ahead and sit at the table. We have Miss Vanessa Williams, Mr. David Sanford, Roxanne, I'm sorry if I'm not correctly reading the last name, Akana Sanford, and then Marcel Johnson and Artemio Hernandez. So for those of you that are testifying and sitting through some of the other nominations until we were able to call on you.
My name is Vanessa Williams. I am a lawyer in private practice, and my particular focus is in administrative and business law. Throughout my career, I've worked in various capacities with and on government boards and commissions. And today I'm here to submit my testimony in support of Governor Lou Leon Guerrero's nomination of Mr. Dave Sanford as a member of the Government of Guam Retirement Fund Board of Trustees. I have the utmost confidence in Dave's nomination to the position. His competence and integrity will ensure that the direction and operation of the retirement fund continues to promote economy and efficiency in administering the benefits for the employees of the government of Guam, while encouraging qualified personnel to enter and remain in the service of the government. I've known Dave for close to 20 years. I've always known him to be a person of great humility, integrity, and thoughtful deliberation. I have also watched as he has grown to be a conscientious business and family man who recognizes both the importance of our workforce as well as the greater community in which we share. He's very active in the business community, all while being a supportive husband to his lovely wife Roxanne and father to their 3 children. Dave is also extremely competent and intelligent. His combined business background in technology, auditing, and assurance make him a uniquely valuable asset to the Retirement Fund Board. In his experience, he's used technology to transform processes to save thousands of hours in manual labor per year, and he's promoted more efficient workflows. I have no doubt he will bring the same forward-thinking business sense to the Retirement Fund Board once he is confirmed. In closing, I want to voice my highest support for his prompt confirmation to the Retirement Fund Board of Trustees. His intelligence, integrity, and expertise will bring invaluable strengths to effectuate its mission and strategic intent. Thank you.
Siduis Masi Pera and now. Again, as I've mentioned before, it's so very important for us to be hearing about people who know, and you've known Mr. Sanford for about 20 years, so people who really know and can testify on their behalf. And then all of the things that you bring forward are those sort of qualities that are very important to us. We do want to hear that our board members are those that have been known to have integrity, be thoughtful in their deliberations, to be very conscientious, competent, intelligent, and those sort of things. So thank you very much for providing that perspective. We'll now also go on to Mr. Johnson, if you can state your full name and then go ahead and begin your testimony.
Good morning, Senator Marsh-Titano. My name is R. Marcel Johnson. I'm here in support of the nomination of Dave Sanford for the Government of Guam Retirement Fund Board of Trustees. I had the honor of meeting and working with Mr. Sanford when we both served in the steering committee of the Guam Young Professionals. Mr. Sanford served as the treasurer, a responsibility that was given to him in no small part due to his impressive background, including his work with Sanford Technology Group, his time with Deloitte & Touche, and the fact that he's a certified public accountant. I know Dave not only to be a very smart and driven person, but also to be someone who cares deeply about his family and about our island. He's the type of person who should be on a board like this because he's the type of person who can take a position like this seriously and who would give it the attention and priority that it deserves. I personally think it's important to usher in a new wave of people in government boards and positions who are young, properly educated, who have relevant experience, who have new ideas, and who are not content to merely do things the way they've been done in the past. I think Mr. Sanford is exactly that type of person, and I think this board could truly benefit from his membership. Thank you for your time and attention in considering his nomination. I humbly and respectfully request that you hope that you and those in your committee see fit to approve his nomination. Thank you.
Sijuis Masi Zansulang for your testimony, Mr. Johnson. Again, it's very important to us to hear that there are those in the community that really see the value and see the integrity of those that are nominated. It provides that reassurance that it's somebody who will, as you said, take their position seriously and make it a priority. So thank you for sharing those things. We'll next move on to Mr. Sanford himself.
Good morning, Vice Chair Taitano. My name is David Sanford. I'm the General Manager of Sanford Technology Group. Thank you for being here this morning and allowing me to provide testimony. I'd like to thank Governor Lou Leon Guerrero and Lieutenant Governor Josh Sonorio for nominating me for this position. I'd also like to thank my parents, Dave and Tony Sanford, and my wife, Roxana Kana Sanford, for encouraging me to accept the nomination and to step up to the plate and serve the community. It's a great honor to be nominated, and I accept the nomination. Please allow me to give an introduction to my qualifications. From 2003 to 2010, I lived in Rochester, New York. It was there I attended Rochester Institute of Technology, where I obtained a Bachelor of Science in Software Engineering and an MBA in Accounting. Despite having a job secured months before graduation in New York, I decided that it was time to come home. So I returned back to Guam at the end of 2010. Since returning home, I've worked as an audit associate with Deloitte. I've participated in the audit of several companies and governments, both local and outer island. During that time, I also studied for and passed all 4 parts of the CPA exam. In 2011, I obtained my CPA license, and I also transitioned to working with our family business, Sanford Technology Group. Over the past 8 years at Sanford Technology Group, I've served as a programmer, an internal accountant, and a systems consultant. So I basically am like the jack of all trades, jumping around to different areas of the business. With that experience, I was recently promoted to general manager for Sanford Technology Group. In terms of my professional memberships, I am a member of the Guam Society of CPAs, the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, and the Guam Young Professionals, where I am a current member and past treasurer. This is my first nomination to a board position, and if confirmed, will be the first time that I'm serving on a board. With this, I realize that there is a learning curve ahead, as well as some unique challenges. I feel that my experience over the years, my educational background, and my interactions with other professionals in different industries gives me the skill set I need to face and overcome any of these challenges. Also, I think it's a benefit to the board to have a fresh perspective. There may be some existing issues that have been persistent with the retirement fund board, and hopefully by bringing someone in from outside and also from the private sector, I'll provide a different viewpoint or a different angle and maybe give some ideas that haven't been thought of in the past. If confirmed, I look forward to working with the board to ensure that the retirees receive all the benefits that they've earned. And I look forward to protecting and preserving the soundness of the fund for the benefit of all its members. Thank you.
Saina Ma'asi for your testimony. Mr. Sanford, you brought forward several important points, definitely some of them being the background that you bring along with you. I think it makes very good sense to have somebody in the retirement board having the accounting background that you do have, having an MBA, being a certified public accountant. Those seem to be very logical in helping us, as you stated, make sure that the finances there and the operation are running in a sound way for our retirees. So definitely your background seems that it could really provide important skills and help guide the board. And let's see, I had noted some other things, and you did as well, some of your volunteerism or organizations that you belong to. So, being a member of the Guam Society of Certified Public Accountants, American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, as you mentioned, the Guam Young Professionals. And I think those help speak to, so my first question would be the time commitment. You might have been here earlier when I noted that for a lot of our commissions and boards, one of the problems that we've had is being able to make quorum so that the work of the board or commission can be done. So this is your first nominee. I think that you're very committed and enthusiastic, but do you see yourself as being able to make the time commitment to make sure that the board is able to meet regularly and conduct its work?
Yes, I do believe that I will have the time available, and I will make the time available for any business that the board needs to attend to. I know that there's a lot of other people in my position, where everyone's busy and everyone is juggling a lot of different schedules, but it's up to the people who are, appointed to make the time, and I feel that I'll be able to do that.
Maulik. And it was also good to hear that your family is on board. I meant to mention it to one of the earlier nominees who had also mentioned he had his wife's full support. And really, having served on a board myself, those kind of commitments from the family members are really important as well. They make a large difference in one being able to make those time commitments and keep everything moving forward. So that was very good to hear. I have a couple of questions, and it says, the first one, as a trustee, you are in a fiduciary relationship to the beneficiaries of the retirement fund in regard to the management of the fund. How would you approach your duties as a trustee to ensure that you act solely in the interest of the members and beneficiaries of the fund?
I would use my CPA background, not necessarily with any specific rules or regulations, but the general knowledge and the know-how of being able to, read financial statements, understand any laws that are applicable. And being from the private sector, I don't have, I don't know how to explain it, but I'm not part of the retirement fund in terms of, benefiting from it. So I could look at it more objectively. I also don't have any immediate family members who are there, so I wouldn't be swayed in one way or another to make decisions based on someone's input. I would just look at the facts as they are and discuss with the other trustees on what we think is the best course going forward.
That was very helpful to hear. Sana maasi pera enau. And the other one, this largely got to the other one, so I'll just move on to the general question of conflict of interest. And you already touched on it a bit, that you don't have family, you yourself are not part of the retirement. But if you see any other potential conflict of interest, do you think that you would have any trouble in recusing yourself for that?
When I was speaking with Lieutenant Governor Tenorio, that was one of the issues that I brought up. I asked him specifically because I didn't know, since it's my first time, if there would be any conflicts of interest. So we went through the different areas of business that I'm involved in, and we've decided that there are no conflicts. In the event one does come up, I will recuse myself.
It's very good to hear that you've had that conversation already. I think that speaks to your due diligence and having that at the forefront of your mind. So again, very reassuring to hear. So, Saduas Masi Totus Hamzu, if there's no one left to testify, or if the people that are at the table have no further statements, the public hearing on the appointments of Mr. John A. Smith as a member of the Civil Service Commission, Mr. Anthony P. Benavente as a member of the Civil Service Commission, and Mr. David N. Sanford as a member of the Board of Trustees, Government of Guam Retirement Fund, private sector representative, has been duly heard. This public hearing is now going to be recessed. The time is now 11:40, almost 7, so we'll go with 7. Individuals who wish to submit testimony will have several days from today to do so by emailing it to speaker@guamlegislature.org, or you may send or hand deliver it to 163 Chalan Santo Papa, Hagatnya, Guam. Sana maasi and have a good day.